In September 2020, Aaron Delaney, a 34-year-old civil engineer living in Des Moines, Iowa, discovered something that would shatter his life and capture the attention of the entire nation. His daughter Zoe, who had been missing for exactly 2 years, was found living just 200 yards from their home, in the house of their neighbor, Norman Vale. How could a 7-year-old girl vanish without a trace, mobilizing the state police, the media, and thousands of volunteers, only to be found in the very same neighborhood where she grew up? How was it possible for a child to live for 2 full years so close to her family without anyone realizing it? What investigators uncovered in this case would reveal psychological manipulation techniques so advanced, they would challenge the very foundation of the child protection system in the United States. Before we dive into this disturbing case, if you enjoy true mysteries like this one, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now let's see how it all began. Des Moines, the capital of Iowa, is home to over 200,000 residents. A historic city known for its riverside parks and quiet suburbs, it offers a sense of safety where families raise children in what feels like peace. The Oakwood neighborhood, located northwest of downtown, is one of those places where everyone knows each other, where kids ride their bikes freely, and where neighbors wave each morning. This is where the Delaney family lived. Aaron Delaney, at 34, worked as a civil engineer for a local construction firm. A meticulous, devoted man, he built his life around simple values: hard work, family, and community. His wife Claire was an elementary school teacher downtown. Together they had Zoe, born in 2011. Zoe was a lively 7-year-old girl with curly chestnut hair and sparkling green eyes. Curious and sociable, she attended Oakwood Elementary, a 10-minute walk from home. Her teachers described her as a diligent student, perhaps a little shy with strangers, but cheerful and confident with her classmates. She loved drawing, collecting stickers, and feeding the neighborhood cats. Zoe had a sweet habit of greeting everyone she passed, which made her the little mascot of the block. The Delaneys lived at 152 Oakwood Drive, a single-story house with a small yard where Zoe loved to play on her bright red swing set. Next door at 154 lived Norman Vale, a 60-year-old retiree whose wife had passed away in 2015. Formerly employed at City Hall, he was described by neighbors as quiet, polite, but reserved. He kept his yard immaculate, always nodding a polite hello but never lingering in conversation. Physically, he was of average height with neatly combed gray hair, usually dressed in wool cardigans and corduroy slacks. Since his wife's death, Norman had developed a strict routine. Every morning he drove to the local diner at the exact same time, and every afternoon he could be seen reading the newspaper in his yard or tinkering in his garage. Some neighbors had noticed that he often watched children playing outside, but no one thought much of it. After all, it seemed harmless for a lonely older man to observe the life of the neighborhood. The relationship between the Delaneys and Norman was cordial but distant. They exchanged polite words over the fence, sometimes did small favors like watering each other's plants, but never grew close. Claire found him a little too observant for comfort, while Aaron dismissed it as nothing more than boredom. Zoe, with her naturally friendly spirit, always greeted Mr. Vale cheerfully, sometimes pausing to pet the cats that gathered near his porch. Norman seemed to enjoy these moments, occasionally giving her candy or trading cards he claimed to collect. Innocent gestures on the surface, though noticed by those paying attention. Oakwood functioned like a small, tight-knit community. Mrs. Latham, who ran the corner store, knew every resident by name. Mr. Fisher, the mailman, often stopped to chat with retirees on his route. This village-like atmosphere created a sense of security, one that could sometimes be deceiving. But in September 2018, that illusion of safety would be shattered forever. On Wednesday, September 26th, Aaron Delaney's life would turn into a nightmare. The morning had begun like any other. The alarm rang at 6:30. Claire prepared breakfast before leaving for her classroom downtown. Aaron got ready to take Zoe to school before heading to a bridge renovation project he was supervising. That morning, Zoe wore her favorite red sweater with a fox design, blue jeans, and white sneakers with pink laces. She packed her forest animal reading book, her math workbook, and her art supplies for class later that day. As always, father and daughter walked hand in hand to school. Zoe chattered about a dream she'd had, flying over the rooftops of their neighborhood. Aaron remembered vividly how she skipped with excitement at the sight of a stray cat near the school gate. and how she smiled as she waved goodbye before disappearing into the playground. Work went smoothly that day at the construction site south of the city. Around 3 p.m., Claire called to remind Aaron she had a faculty meeting, so he needed to pick Zoe up at 3:30, as usual. He arrived 10 minutes early, waiting by the main gate where Zoe always came out. Parents gathered, some on foot, others in cars, chatting about weekend plans and the coming fall break. When the bell rang, the schoolyard filled with laughing children rushing toward their parents. Aaron scanned the crowd, searching for Zoe's red sweater. Minutes passed. The number of children dwindled, but still no sign of his daughter. At 3:45, worried but not yet panicked, Aaron went to the front office. The secretary, Mrs. Griffin, greeted him with her usual smile. But when he asked if Zoe might have stayed behind, her face grew serious. She quickly checked the records and called Zoe's teacher, Ms. Lane. Ms. Lane arrived moments later, visibly shaken. She confirmed that Zoe had been in class all day, but by dismissal she was gone. At first she assumed Zoe had gone to the restroom, but when she didn't return, concern began to spread. The principal, Mr. Carpenter, organized a search immediately. Teachers and staff scoured every classroom, hallway, restroom, and storage area. Oakwood Elementary was a single-story building. There weren't many places a child could hide. Yet Zoe was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Mrs. Griffin called Claire on her cell phone. Hearing the news, Claire rushed from her meeting, heart pounding, mind racing with terrifying thoughts. By 4:15, after nearly an hour of fruitless searching, Principal Carpenter made the call no one wanted to make. He phoned the police. The Des Moines Police Department was alerted immediately, and within 20 minutes 2 patrol officers arrived at the school. Officer David Cross, a seasoned cop in his 40s, quickly took control. He methodically questioned Ms. Lane, Zoe's teacher, about the last time she had seen the girl. She recalled handing out homework around 3 p.m. Zoe had been in her seat, focused as always. But when the final bell rang and the children began packing up, she hadn't tracked each student individually. Zoe's classmates were interviewed one by one. Her best friend, Maddie, said they had played together at recess that afternoon. Lucas, the boy who sat beside her, confirmed she was present during math. But no one remembered seeing her after dismissal. Officer Cross carefully examined the school grounds. There were 3 exits: the main gate where parents gathered, a back service door that opened onto a quiet side street, and an emergency exit on the left side of the building. That last door was supposed to stay locked, but a check revealed it could be opened from the inside without triggering an alarm. The search spread beyond the building. Officers combed the nearby park, questioned shop owners, and checked bus stops. Still, there was no trace of Zoe. It was as if she had vanished between her classroom and the front gate. By 6:30 p.m., Claire arrived, her face wrecked with panic. Her reunion with Aaron was heartbreaking. Both collapsed into each other's arms, unable to comprehend what could have happened to their little girl. Officer Cross informed them that the case would be immediately escalated to the Major Crimes Unit. At 7 p.m., Detective Mark Mercer, head of the Criminal Investigations Division, arrived on scene. A 52-year-old with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes, Mercer had handled many missing child cases. He knew that every passing hour mattered. He ordered an urgent search. K-9 units were called in to sweep the wooded areas around the school. By 9 p.m., the Iowa Amber Alert system was activated. The description went out across radio, television, and digital billboards statewide. 7-year-old girl, curly chestnut hair, green eyes, wearing a red sweater with a fox design, blue jeans and white sneakers. That night, no one in the Oakwood neighborhood slept. Dozens of neighbors joined the search, armed with flashlights and cell phones. They canvassed the streets, parks, and empty lots, calling Zoe's name into the darkness, desperate for a response. Among them was Norman Vale. He could be seen pacing nearby streets with a flashlight, asking passers-by if they had seen anything, his worry appearing as real as anyone else's. He even offered to help officers check private yards, pointing out he knew the area well after so many years living there. But despite the extraordinary mobilization of more than 150 people, no trace of Zoe was found that night. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a devastated family and a stunned community. In the weeks that followed, life for the Delaneys and all of Oakwood changed drastically. The investigation, led by Detective Sarah Garner, quickly hit a wall. Despite repeated appeals for witnesses, systematic searches, and the review of every surveillance camera in the city, no solid lead emerged. Detective Garner, a 42-year-old investigator known for her professionalism and compassion in child-related cases, coordinated a meticulous inquiry. Aaron and Claire's phones were analyzed, their bank accounts scrutinized, their social and professional lives dissected. Standard procedure, but for grieving parents, it added unbearable weight. Being treated as possible suspects while living through their worst nightmare only deepened the strain. Claire, once energetic and organized, slid into depression. The teacher who had once loved guiding children could no longer face her classroom without thinking of Zoe. She took medical leave that stretched on week after week. Her days became a cycle of waiting by the phone for a call that might change everything, staring at news reports hoping to see Zoe's face, and wandering the streets of Des Moines handing out flyers. Aaron tried to return to work after 2 weeks, clinging to routine, but colleagues noticed the change. The precise, reliable engineer now forgot meetings, made careless mistakes, and seemed constantly distracted. At night, he was haunted by recurring nightmares of Zoe calling for help, her voice fading before he could reach her. The couple, once inseparable, began to fracture under the weight of grief. Claire clung to her pain, refusing to resume anything resembling normal life. Aaron, desperate to keep hope alive, pushed her to see a therapist. Their differences turned into arguments, something unimaginable before the tragedy. Zoe's bedroom became a shrine Claire refused to alter, while Aaron believed they had to keep living, to be ready for her return. The neighborhood changed too. Parents now escorted their kids everywhere, never leaving them unattended. Conversations on porches and at the store revolved around Zoe's disappearance, feeding rumors and theories. Some pointed to strangers seen around the school in the days prior. Others suggested a relative might have been involved. Mrs. Latham, the grocer, claimed she'd noticed a white van parked near the school several times in the weeks before Zoe vanished. Police chased down every white van in the county, but nothing came of it. The mailman, Mr. Fisher, mentioned seeing a man in a dark suit watching children after school, but his description was too vague to build a sketch. National media soon picked up the story. Major networks aired primetime segments. Talk shows dedicated entire episodes to missing children, featuring Zoe's case. The disappearance of a 7-year-old girl in broad daylight struck a deep chord across America. Thousands of messages of support poured in on social media. Advocacy groups for missing children reached out to the Delaney's with offers of help and advice. But the attention brought problems too. Cranks called the family with false tips. Self-proclaimed psychics preyed on their desperation. Reporters camped outside their home. Their phones rang at all hours. After 6 months of intense investigation, Detective Garner faced the grim reality. Every traditional lead had been exhausted. Forensic analysis of the school turned up nothing. Despite endless appeals and digital tracing, not a single credible witness or clue emerged. The working theory remained abduction by a stranger, but without evidence, it was only a theory. The idea that Zoe had left voluntarily was dismissed due to her age and her stable family life. The possibility of an accident was explored as well. Creeks, wells, and dangerous areas within miles of the city were searched thoroughly. Again, nothing. As frustration mounted, neighbors began whispering their own suspicions. Norman Vale, who continued to take part in every weekend search, often spoke about child trafficking rings. With surprising detail, he explained how such networks operated, abducting children to sell overseas or exploit. His unsettling knowledge of the subject made some uneasy. Across the street, Mrs. Carson confided to friends that she found it strange how much Norman seemed to know about such dark things. Public suspicion faded quickly beneath the gratitude people felt for a neighbor who gave up his free time to help with searches and who seemed genuinely shaken by Zoe's disappearance. Zoe's 8th birthday, April 15, 2019, was especially hard on the family. Claire insisted on a small ceremony in the backyard, a cake, candles, the table set as if their daughter might walk through the gate at any moment. Aaron went along with it, knowing the ritual helped her bear the unbearable, even if he found it agonizing. From his yard next door, Norman Vale watched, then stepped to the fence to offer condolences and a small bouquet from his garden. The gesture moved them both. They took it as a sign of real solidarity. By early summer 2019, 9 months after the disappearance, the investigation slid into a holding pattern. Detective Sarah Garner kept the file, but resources dwindled as newer cases demanded attention. Understandable on paper, it left the Delaneys feeling abandoned by the system. During that period, Claire developed an obsession with social media and forums about missing children. She spent hours trading messages with other parents in the same nightmare, studying similarities between cases, building ever more elaborate theories. The relentless search for information became her purpose, even as it pulled her further from day-to-day life and from her husband. Aaron, meanwhile, buried himself in work and clung to routine. He began volunteering with a parents' group for missing children and helped organize awareness campaigns. The activity gave him the sense he was doing something tangible to bring Zoe home, though deep down, where he would not allow himself to look, sat a terrible feeling he refused to name: resignation. Saturday, September 21st, 2020, almost exactly 2 years since Zoe vanished, hung heavy over the house. Paradoxically, that was the day fate forced its way back in. Aaron got up early, as he had every Saturday for 2 years, to join the weekly searches. But that morning his car wouldn't start, and the mechanic couldn't come until Monday. Claire, in an especially fragile spell, stayed shut in the bedroom, unable to face an anniversary that felt like a wound torn open. Restless and raw, Aaron decided to tackle some yard work he'd put off for months. He started trimming the hedge that separated his yard from Norman Vale's, a privet planted when the homes were built, now nearly 7 feet tall. Over the years, the branches had grown dense and interwoven, giving both properties full privacy. Around 10 a.m., reaching the highest section with an electric trimmer, Aaron heard something that froze him where he stood. Through the greenery came the clear sound of a child's voice singing a tune he knew by heart. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. It was Zoe's favorite, the one she hummed every morning while getting ready for school. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might split his chest. He killed the trimmer and listened, wondering if grief had finally broken his mind. Then the voice shifted bright and carefree into the itsy-bitsy spider. He would know that voice anywhere. It was his daughter. Shaking, Aaron climbed onto the step ladder and peeked over the hedge. What he saw locked him in place. In Norman's yard, a little girl with curly chestnut hair played quietly with a doll. She wore a blue summer dress he didn't recognize, but her face, her movements, the way she rocked the doll, everything matched his memory of Zoe. She'd grown. Thinner, maybe, her hair a little longer, but there was no mistaking her. It was Zoe, alive and seemingly healthy, playing less than 30 feet from her family's back door. Aaron nearly stumbled off the ladder. He climbed down, breathless, mind white with noise. His first instinct was to call Claire and then the police, but something held him back. He had to be absolutely certain before handing his wife a hope that might shatter her. He had to understand how this could possibly be. He climbed again, more carefully this time. The girl now sat on a little red plastic chair working a construction toy. Just then, Norman stepped out with a tray, orange juice and cookies. His voice was tender. "Come on, sweetheart, snack time. You must be hungry after all that playing." Then, "Come on, Mary." Aaron frowned. The man he'd known for years, who had joined the searches for his missing child, who had offered condolences at every grim milestone, was calling Zoe by another name. More unsettling, the girl answered to it. She ran to Norman, hugged his cheek, and settled in for her snack. "Thanks, Grandpa Norman," she chirped, in that clear little voice that erased the last of Aaron's doubt. He stood on the ladder, stunned, joy flooding in alongside a cold, rising rage at the man who had stolen her, and a bewilderment that hollowed him out. How could Zoe seem so at ease with her captor? Why didn't she look distressed? What had this man done to make her call him Grandpa with such affection? Aaron watched for several minutes, absorbing every detail. Norman's yard looked tailored for a child, a swing near the back fence, toys neatly stacked in a plastic chest, children's drawings taped to the sliding glass door. How had he never noticed? How had an entire neighborhood failed to see a little girl living just a few yards away? The answer took shape as he studied the layout. The tall, thick hedge completely blocked sight lines between the yards. Norman's windows facing the backyard weren't visible from the street or the neighboring homes. And the times the girl was outside likely matched hours when neighbors were at work or busy elsewhere. Aaron climbed down, legs trembling. He had to choose, call the police now and risk tipping Norman off, or take a moment to set up a response that would ensure Zoe's safe recovery. He chose caution and dialed Detective Sarah Garner directly, the investigator who had led the early months and kept in touch with the family. At first incredulous, Garner grasped the gravity as Aaron described what he'd seen, detail by detail. "Mr. Delaney," she said, voice steady, "do nothing to alert your neighbor. Stay inside. Do not approach your daughter, and do not tell your wife just yet. We're on our way with a team." Aaron hung up and moved to the kitchen window, keeping a discreet watch on the yard next door. Zoe and Norman had gone back inside. The wait that followed was the longest of his life. Every minute stretched into an hour. Every car door outside made him jump. Claire slept in the bedroom down the hall, unaware that the child she'd mourned for 2 years was just a few steps away. At exactly 11:37 a.m., 61 minutes after his call, 3 unmarked police vehicles slid quietly onto the block. Officers took positions around Norman's house, covering every possible exit. Detective Garner walked to the front door and knocked hard. The seconds between the knock and the opening felt endless. From his kitchen window, Aaron watched, head throbbing with focus. Norman appeared in the doorway, as neatly dressed as ever in a beige cardigan and corduroy slacks. The expression on his face shifted from surprise to something Aaron couldn't read. Resignation, maybe. Relief. "Mr. Vale," Detective Sarah Garner said firmly, holding out her badge. "Detective Garner, Major Crimes, Des Moines Police. We need to search your home as part of an ongoing investigation." Norman offered no resistance, no protests of innocence, not even a demand for explanation. He simply nodded slowly and stepped aside to let the officers in. His lack of reaction surprised even Garner, who was more accustomed to suspects loudly denying guilt, whether innocent or not. "Where is the child?" she asked bluntly. "In her room," Norman replied flatly. "She's napping. She always naps after her snack." The answer confirmed Aaron's worst fears. His daughter had been conditioned into a routine so strict, so ingrained, it felt natural to her. Garner signaled her team to secure the house, then headed upstairs with Norman leading the way. His posture that of a man who had given up. Aaron couldn't stay put. Despite Garner's warning, he rushed from his home and approached his neighbor's front door. An officer tried to stop him, but Garner, descending just then, waved him through. "She's okay," she told Aaron, her smile strained, her voice trembling. "She's sleeping peacefully. We'll wait for her to wake up naturally, to avoid traumatizing her further." It should have comforted him. Instead, it raised horrifying questions. How could his daughter sleep so soundly in her abductor's house? What had been done to make her feel safe here? And worst of all, would she even remember her real family after 2 years in captivity? While a medical team prepared for Zoe's awakening, Garner began her interrogation. Norman sat in his worn living room, speaking in a dull monotone as if reciting a rehearsed script. "I never wanted to hurt her," he began. "At first I just wanted to talk. She looked so lonely coming home from school." Garner cut him off. "Mr. Vale, Zoe was never alone. Her parents picked her up every day." Norman paused, caught in his lie before his story even began. He shifted, then continued with more hesitation. "That day, September 26th, I was near the woods behind the school. I used to watch her sometimes on the playground. When she came out the side door, I thought it was a sign." "A sign of what?" Garner pressed. "That someone needed to take care of her. Her parents worked all the time. They never had time for her. But I had nothing but time. It was a grotesque distortion. The Delaneys had been loving, attentive parents. But in Norman's fractured mind, this fiction justified his crime. "How did you get her to go with you?" Garner asked. "I told her parents had been in an accident, that they were in the hospital, and asked me to pick her up. She believed me because she knew me, because I was the nice neighbor who gave her candy." Garner's stomach twisted. It was the oldest trick, exploiting a child's trust in the adults they see every day. Zoe had no reason to fear the man who lived next door. And then, I brought her here. I told her she had to stay hidden, that the bad people who hurt her parents were looking for her. She was scared, so she listened. At first, she cried all the time. She begged for her mom. But little by little, he stopped, realizing the horror of his confession. Little by little what? Garner pressed. She got used to it. I was kind to her. I bought her toys, clothes, books. I taught her at home. She was smart. She learned fast. And then I told her her parents had died in the accident. From the hallway, Aaron's heart broke. His daughter had spent 2 years believing her parents were dead, mourning them while bonding with her captor. The cruelty of the manipulation was beyond anything he had imagined. "Why did you change her name?" Garner asked. "Mary. That was my wife's name. She died 3 years earlier. I was so alone." Zoe, Mary, she filled the void. The pathology was clearer now. Norman wasn't a predator in the traditional sense. He was a man broken by grief and isolation, who had projected his needs onto a stolen child. It explained why Zoe showed no signs of sexual abuse, but it did nothing to lessen the gravity of his crime. At 3:15, Zoe awoke from her nap. The medical and psychological team, with Garner's guidance, handled her first moments with extreme care. The 9-year-old appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She wore a pink dress with butterfly prints and frilly white socks. "Grandpa Norman?" she asked, confused by the strangers in the living room. Dr. Elaine Mercer, a child psychiatrist specializing in trauma, approached gently. "Hi, Mary," she said, deliberately using the name the girl answered to. "I'm Dr. Mercer. We're here to talk with you and your grandpa." Zoe looked around curiously but without fear until her eyes landed on Aaron. For a long heartbeat, they stared at each other. He held his breath, praying for recognition, a smile, some flicker of memory. But Zoe turned away, showing no sign she knew him. To her, he was just another stranger in the crowd. What followed was the most heartbreaking moment of all. With patience and calm, Dr. Mercer began explaining that the story Zoe had been told about her parents' death wasn't true. "No," Zoe screamed, rushing to Norman. "Grandpa never lies. My parents are dead. He told me." The room froze at the sight. Zoe clung to the man who had kidnapped her, convinced he was the only stable presence in her life. Norman wept openly, trying to soothe her even as he realized the web of lies he'd spun for 2 years was collapsing. "My little Mary," he whispered, stroking her hair. "You need to know the truth now. Your real parents, they're alive. They've searched for you everywhere. They love you more than anything in this world." The confession, born of guilt, triggered Zoe's panic. She screamed, denying everything, begging to be left alone with Norman. It was then that Claire burst through the door, awakened by the commotion and the flashing police lights. Officers tried to hold her back, but she forced her way in. Her eyes fell on the child she hadn't seen in 2 years. "Zoe, my baby!" she cried, arms outstretched, but her daughter recoiled, screaming, "I don't know her." "Grandpa, make them go away! Don't let them take me!" Claire collapsed, caught just in time by Aaron. Together, they faced the crushing reality. The daughter they had mourned for 2 years now saw them as strangers. Even threats. Dr. Mercer stepped in firmly but gently. She told Zoe she would need to leave with her real parents, that she understood it was scary and confusing, but no one would hurt her. They would help her understand what had happened. "And Grandpa?" Zoe sobbed. "Who's going to take care of him?" "He'll be all alone." Her question revealed the depth of Norman's manipulation. Not only had Zoe bonded with her captor, she now felt responsible for him, carrying the role of emotional substitute he had forced on her. Escorted by officers but allowed to remain present to ease the transition, Norman addressed her one last time. "My little Mary. Zoe, you have to go now. These people are your real parents. They love you deeply. They've been suffering every day since you left. You'll be happy with them, I promise." "But why did you lie to me?" she whispered, voice cracking. The question stopped him cold. How could he explain to a 9-year-old the madness of grief, loneliness, and selfishness that drove him to destroy a family? "Because I was very sad and very alone," he finally said. "And I did something terribly wrong so I wouldn't be alone anymore. But now, you have to go home." The medical team arranged to transfer Zoe to Des Moines General Hospital for a full health workup and an initial trauma evaluation. She agreed to go, but only after saying goodbye to Norman and after she'd collected her favorite doll and a few personal things. The walk out of the house stunned everyone. The entire Oakwood neighborhood had gathered in the street, drawn by the swarm of police. When residents saw Aaron and Claire emerge with a little girl they recognized instantly despite the 2 years gone by, a hush fell over the crowd. Mrs. Latham, the grocer, broke into tears as she grasped what had just happened. Mr. Fisher, the mail carrier, smacked his forehead. He'd delivered mail for 2 years to the man who'd been holding the missing girl. Neighbors who had posted flyers and combed parks realized she'd been just beyond that thick hedge the whole time. News trucks began to arrive as rumors spread. The case that had gripped the country 2 years earlier was suddenly back on every front page. This time it wasn't only the tragedy of a disappearance, it was the miracle of a return, and the horror of a psychological manipulation, as calculated as it was chilling. Zoe stayed in the hospital for 3 weeks. Doctors found that physically she hadn't been harmed. Norman had built a counterfeit cocoon around her without sexual violence. That fact, while a relief in one narrow sense, did nothing to lessen the psychological gravity. Rebuilding Zoe's identity would be slow and complex. Clinicians discovered she had developed 2 coexisting selves: Mary, the well-behaved, compliant child who lived with Grandpa Norman, and fragments of Zoe, the playful little girl who once lived with her parents. The 2 identities overlapped and collided, leaving her deeply unsure of who she really was. The first private reunions with her parents were hard. She repeatedly tested the adults she was told were her family, searching for familiar anchors and faces she no longer remembered. Claire had to relearn how to be a mother to a child who had grown without her, who carried experiences she didn't share, habits she didn't recognize. Aaron discovered his daughter now read fluently, handled math above her grade level, skills learned during her captivity, yet she had no memory of certain games they'd loved before she vanished. Norman had indeed homeschooled her with determination, giving her a solid but warped education inside a house built on lies. 10 months later, the trial took place in Polk County District Court. Norman Vale, now 70, pled guilty to all charges, including kidnapping and unlawful confinement of a minor. His attorneys argued diminished responsibility due to his mental state, but psychiatric evaluation concluded he understood the gravity of what he'd done. Zoe, by then 11, testified with a child psychologist by her side. In simple, steady words, she described those 2 years. She spoke without hatred about life with Grandpa Norman, and about the shock and fear she felt when she learned her world had been built on a falsehood. "I didn't understand why everyone kept saying I was Zoe when I was Mary," she told the judge. "Grandpa Norman was nice to me, but now I know he wasn't allowed to keep me. My real parents didn't leave me. They were looking for me." The court sentenced Norman to 12 years in state prison. It was a heavy sentence even, without sexual violence, reflecting the jury's resolve to punish the deliberate psychological manipulation of a child and the trauma inflicted on an entire family. The Zoe Delaney case also reshaped how missing child searches were conducted. Investigators recognized they had focused on areas far from the home, neglecting the possibility that an abductor could operate within the victim's immediate surroundings. New protocols prioritized systematic checks in the close circle, neighbors included, people often treated as above suspicion. The state's Amber Alert review likewise changed. Analysis of the case showed the alerts had gone out effectively, but no one had mandated door-to-door checks across the immediate neighborhood. That oversight, obvious only in hindsight, had allowed Norman to keep Zoe just a few houses away. 3 years after her rescue, Zoe returned to regular classes at a private school in Des Moines. The psychological scars remained, bouts of anxiety, a wary distance with unfamiliar adults. But the teenager she was becoming appeared steadier. She chose to keep the name Zoe Marie, refusing to erase that part of her history, even as she rejected the lies that created it. The Delaneys moved to a different neighborhood, unable to stay on Oakwood Drive with its relentless echoes. Claire returned to teaching after 2 years of leave, refocusing her work on supporting children in crisis. Aaron kept his job as a civil engineer but devoted a portion of his free time to a parents' organization for missing children, helping families entering the same nightmare he and Claire had lived. Norman's house at 154 Oakwood remains empty. No buyer has come forward for a property so marked by tragedy. Neighbors avoid walking past it. Kids, in their blunt way, call it the bad grandpa's house. Curious passers-by sometimes linger on the sidewalk, staring at an ordinary facade that hid one of the most unsettling cases of psychological captivity the city had ever seen. Zoe's story continues to teach child advocacy, experts about the dynamics that allow predators to maintain emotional control. It has also opened the public's eyes to a difficult truth. Kidnapped children are not always restrained by force. They can be held by lies so sophisticated they learn to protect their captor. Today, Zoe Marie Delaney is 16. She's chosen to speak publicly about her experience to help other kids recognize grooming techniques. Her message is simple and powerful. If an adult asks you to keep a secret, even a nice adult, that's never normal. People who truly care about you will never ask you to lie to your parents. This case shows how predators exploit a child's natural trust and physical proximity to commit their crimes. It also reveals gaps in our protective systems and the need to stay vigilant, even with the people we see every day. What did you think of this story? Did you spot the warning signs along the way? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this deep dive moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next case. Leave a like if this story resonated, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Together we can raise awareness of these disturbing but crucial realities.